there, very okay. Brazil's elections are coming up on October the 2nd. There are 12 presidential candidates. But today on the stream, we are going to be focusing on two. The current president, Jair Bolsonaro, and also Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva. Here they are debating on August the 29th.
The country I left is a country that the people miss. It was a country of employment. It was a country where people had the right to live with dignity, with their heads up. And this country will come back.
There was corruption. President Lula, you want to come back, what for? To keep doing the same thing at Petrobras? For the Workers' Party, the worse off the people are, the poorer, the better for them to do politics off them.
So we have two very different candidates there. What would you like to know about them? On today's show, we are going to be exploring key campaign issues and what's at stake for Brazilians. You can join our conversation right here in the comment section on YouTube. Oh, our expert panel. Hello, Ilona, Adriana, Cecilia. It's so lovely to have all three of you here. We are going to unpack the upcoming elections, what's at stake, what's going on in Brazil right now. Ilona, welcome. Please say hello to our audience around the world.
Thank you, family. My name is Ilona Zabo. I'm the co-founder and president of the Igarapé Institute.
Good to have you. Adriana, welcome. Please say hello to our audience.
Thank you for having me, Femi. I'm Adriana Schumacher. I'm a manager at Students for Liberty Brazil.
Good to have you. And Cecilia, nice to see you. Please say hello.
Nice to see you too. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm Cecilia Tornaghi. I'm managing editor at America's Quarterly.
All right, very good. I am going to get you guests to build a picture of what these two candidates are like. Let's put up the candidate who's currently president at the moment. Cecilia, tell me two things about Bolsonaro that would be helpful for our international audience to know.
Bolsonaro came in from left field, even though he's on the right. He just surprised everybody when he got elected. He is a longtime politician who was in Congress for almost 30 years as a French character who just exploded in 2018 as the leading candidate with a discourse and a rhetoric of supporting families, freedom, which to him equates right to have guns, and against abortion and for family, and especially religion.
All right. Ilona, did Cecilia leave you anything more to add to Bolsonaro so we get this instant picture of how he's campaigning, what is he like, what is his style like?
I think Cecilia just put him in the right place, but I would say that he's a far right candidate, like very much like Trump and Viktor Orban and populist authoritarian leaders that are trying to undermine democracy from within. And that's an important feature for this election because it's an election about democracy.
We have it feels like we've got two polar opposites as leading candidates. So let's have a look at Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva, put his candidate card up. And this time, Ilona, you start with two things that would be helpful for us to know before we get deep into our conversation.
Sure. So Lula is a president that came from the people. He had two consecutive mandates and was responsible for including most of Brazilian populations in, let's say, the lower and middle class. So he comes with a flag of Brazil can be happy again. He left also with the corruption scandals. The processes that he was facing were nullified by the justice system because they were not respecting the due process according to our Supreme Court. So he wants to come back to just try another time to show what his party has to do for the Brazilian people.
Celia, go ahead.
Yeah, and this is sort of a playback. This election should have been in 2018. So in 2018, Lula was ahead in the polls when he was arrested and taken to jail under these allegations that Ilona just mentioned. So he was taken out of that run right a few months before the election. So now we're actually sort of reliving a 2018 election. But yes, Lula has a banner of poverty, fighting against poverty. He was a poor man himself. He came from a very, very poor family that migrated from the Northeast almost on foot and had, very little education and sort of like pulled himself up from the bootstraps and became a union leader, very well known, loved globally. He's an incredibly well-spoken man. I mean, he really has the power of words and resonates with people. But so does Bolsonaro in a completely different narrative. But he's also incredibly powerful in his speech.
Adriana, I'm wondering what the atmosphere is like in Brazil right now. A few more weeks to go before the elections. What is at stake for Brazil at this point in terms of social conditions, living conditions? What might be possible depending on what happens on October the 2nd?
Well, actually, we are facing a very polarized environment right now, where tensions are like all over the place, actually. I just hope that whoever gets elected, we have a little more space to debate peacefully, because I see maybe there is a rise of violent speeches, let's say. So I'm kind of worried that this might get worse depending on who gets elected.
Can you give me an example when you say there's a rise of violent speeches? So you've got a better view of that than we have. What does that mean? What have you heard?
Basically on social media, I think Ilona will agree with me. That's something that we see every day, actually, where people are attacking each other, in a very hostile way, actually. And it seems like we can't debate politics in peace anymore.
And I think Adriana, I'll just add that.
Yeah. Ilona, you start, and then Cecilia, you pick up after. Go ahead, Ilona.
So sorry for that.
Yeah.
This is a very important issue. I think, hate speech, disinformation, misinformation is not new. It has been with us in the last elections. But just to say that there is a different thing now, which is a rhetoric, especially from the incumbent in terms of political violence, that people should respond to any result which is not the result of him winning with violence. Take the guns that he allowed people to buy, and then just in his speech, protect democracy, which of course I would argue that it's against democracy, but that's what is at stake, I believe, a possibility of political violence.
Cecilia, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add on. Adriana actually throwing another question to Ilona, because we are seeing just today in the news again another person who was killed by a political discussion, and the men just killing each other. There was another man celebrating his birthday party who was killed because he had Lula banners around his birthday party. So this is translating. It's moving out of social media, and we had this push for more guns on the streets, and that to me is the scariest part of this moment in my country, is this push for more weapons. And Ilona, that's what I would say, because the rise was like some 300% more guns in the hands of civilians since 2018, something like that, right?
Absolutely, Cecilia. So just to say, I worked for over 20 years in civil society with a nonpartisan independent organization, but we're here really facing threats to our democratic system. What Adriana brought in terms of lack of dialogue, we had a closure of civic space in this country that was unprecedented since the dictatorship time. So what we're facing now is really the intent of not accepting the results of the election. And of course, society and institutions are pushing back against that, but we're having to restate every day our support for democracy in the country. And my organization has been leading the gun control, initiative with another organization called Instituto Sou da Paz to be able to have a evidence-based dialogue of what it means to live in a democratic state where people have to accept the rule of the law and cannot take justice into their own hands.
Adriana, let me share with you some headlines that we picked out. They're international headlines. There's some concerns from outside of Brazil. On my laptop here, Brazil's presidential campaign kicks off amid fears of violence. Facebook owner Meta is failing to prevent a repeat of January the 6th in Brazil, report warns. The imminent election crisis in Brazil. Are these overwrought or are these accurate?
I think it's accurate, actually, because, like I said, we are facing a very polarized political campaign. Since the beginning of the campaign, I feel that things are getting a little bit worse in this sense. Because, like I told you before, you go on social media and you see people attacking each other. Like, it seems like we are not able anymore to talk as individuals who have to respect each other's views. And that's something that really worries me because, like Ilona said, it's democracy who is at stake. So it's important to us to learn how to talk to each other again with respect and peacefully.
Let's talk about key issues that are impacting voters. And sometimes what's on the campaign trail is not what really is needed for the country. I'm wondering if there's a disconnect there. But for you, Cecilia, what is one of the most critical issues that will be important when people go to vote, when they make that decision?
Hunger. I think if you have 33 million people hungry in the country, it's, when it gets to the vote, it's one vote, one person. It doesn't matter what your bank account is like. So right now we do have several cohorts of society that support one or the other, but a large one that they're hungry. They need food on the table. So I think that for a very large bit of the population, because the 33 million that are going hungry, then you can add easily several other million people who are just scraping by. So once you have this scenario, I think it's what it's going to count the most at the moment of voting.
I would agree. I'll just add the cost of living in general has increased, as in many other parts of the world, but Brazil faces an economic crisis. People are with difficulties of paying their bills, so unemployment. I also see people worried about health and education, so the public goods provision. And of course, violence and security is always also in the order of the day. So it's, let's say, a jobs, economics, and public goods election.
What about Indigenous voters? Because often they are pushed out of the thinking of where is Brazil going next, something that Lula has always been thinking about, but Bolsonaro has changed that trend in the last few years. Climate, saving the Amazon, who is that important to? The voters?
That's a very interesting question, right? Because I ask myself, you see the world looking at the Brazil and thinking of Brazil as a big Amazon and the issues there. But you go into the Amazon and you see a population that needs jobs. And who is employing them? Who's giving them jobs? Illegal loggers, illegal miners, and people who are pushing deforestation. So these are jobs. And, the larger groups that are behind this push are not the ones actually doing the cutting of the trees. So you have a real issue that Bolsonaro supported in the North, despite his, let's say, weird environmental policies. It's very strong because these are their jobs. So I think that there is a great disconnect there. But if I may say so, given the Indigenous, I think that one thing that happened since 2018 is that the Indigenous groups got a lot more voice and guts and are getting a lot stronger. So I think if there is any benefit to all this, insanity that it's happening on their situation, it's that even though because it got worse to them, I think they got more of a voice and they're getting heard more and more active and more organized. Even, Indigenous women are organizing and several other groups. So I think that there is strength in numbers and there still needs support from the outside, but I think they are getting stronger.
Let me just...
Yeah, I would say, sure.
Ilona, no, go ahead, you go first.
No, I think this is a very important issue because, on the one hand, Cecilia is totally right to say they got more voice and they're coming in bigger numbers. I think it's the highest number since we started recording the numbers of candidates that self-declare Indigenous. But it's also because they are under threat. The territories are under threat, so they feel they need to mobilize politically. So we're seeing a pushback, and it's a good pushback in representation. And we hope, many of them get elected.
I want to just play a little bite from Lula da Silva talking about the Indigenous people of Brazil and why they are important to him and also to Brazil, of course. Let's have a listen.
This country cannot continue to be governed by someone who doesn't like Indigenous people, who doesn't like black people, who doesn't like women, who doesn't like union leaders, who doesn't like the Amazon, Who doesn't like Cerrado, Caatinga, the Amazon rainforest? Who doesn't like its people?
So we wouldn't be complete about talking about an election without talking about misinformation. What's the information out there? I think that's now typical for every election that has any digital input. Adriana, what's been on your WhatsApp messages recently?
On WhatsApp?
Yeah.
Actually, there's a lot of fake news. We have a lot of groups today, so it kind of goes around, you know. And what is dangerous about it is that information spreads really quickly. So I get something like, I don't know, at 4 o'clock, and then 4:30, everybody knows the same thing. And sometimes it's a misleading information.
So I have to be careful about asking you what kind of misleading information, because then we've said it on Al Jazeera, but give me an idea of something that is obviously so ludicrous that everybody is not going to believe it.
Basically information about the two candidates, leading candidates, Bolsonaro and Lula, and misleading information about both of them. That's what I see the most, actually. Like I said before, it seems like people can't talk on a peaceful level, so they have to attack each other, and most of the time using lies to do it. So I don't actually know how we're going to fight this, because everybody's free to share whatever they want. But it's a problem we are facing right now, because many people don't go after information to try to find the truth for themselves, and they believe in the first thing they see.
Yeah, this is I think one of the scariest things.
Cecilia, go.
No, go, Ilona. I was just commenting that this is one of the scariest things, right?
Yeah, and I would say one of the most detrimental one is the ones that put into question our electoral voting system, which is a very modern one that elected, including this current president. And, you know, he and his group tried the whole time to discredit the system, saying there is a secret room that would control and fraud Brazil's elections. And I think this is a very, very dangerous message, because unfortunately, when we see in the polls, the president's supporters do believe that the elections can be frauded, and that were frauded even if he was elected.
Yeah, he said that he won in the first round. He didn't lose. He didn't win in the second round the first time around. But that's a good example, actually, of, you know, of fake news that's running around.
If I don't win, the election has been stolen.
Absolutely.
This is so interesting. Earlier we spoke to Maria, who is the director of Human Rights Watch in Brazil, and this is what she told us. It's almost a warning for what may happen post-October the 2nd. Let's have a look.
President Bolsonaro, who is running for re-election, has sought to undermine trust in the electoral system, alleging, without providing any proof, that it is unreliable. In addition to be attacking the independent media, attacking the judiciary. There have been no proven cases of fraud in Brazil since we adopted the electronic electoral system more than 20 years ago. It's crucial that the international community act in a way that supports free and fair elections in Brazil, and send a clear-cut message to Bolsonaro that any attempt to not respect the will of Brazilian voters will not be tolerated.
So that's an issue that we don't know if it's going to happen yet. There's some concern, but we don't know quite yet. I want to give our viewers watching this a little snippet of Bolsonaro to see his confidence at this stage in the campaign. And then I'm going to open up our conversation. We have so many questions for you guests on YouTube. We're going to do a speed round and see how many of them we can answer and address. But first, here's President Bolsonaro.
We know that we have a fight between good and evil ahead of us. The evil that lasted for 14 years in our country, that almost broke our homeland, and that now wants to come back to the crime scene. They won't. The people are by our side. The people are on the good side. The people know what they want.
All right, so let's go to YouTube. We've got so many questions and comments. Renato, for instance, says, President Bolsonaro refused to buy Pfizer vaccines. There were so many avoidable deaths. He also mocked people dying without breath. It's clearly a death for our democracy. That is Renato's perspective. But it's interesting that for this whole 20 minutes or so, nobody mentioned COVID. Ilona, why?
Well, I would say because we're dealing with the threat of the day, but that was a huge issue in Brazil. 700 people almost dead. There's a research that shows that 4 out of 5 of these deaths could be preventable if the government had acted. The president was a denier himself, as is a denier for climate change, for instance, but he was against masks. He was against buying vaccines. So our governors actually did a great job in providing immunization, because Brazil has a very high records of immunizing our population. But unfortunately now the anti-vax movement also grew in the country. So that was an absolutely failure and a lot of a suffering that should be prevented.
All right. Adriana, you mentioned this earlier on, how divided Brazil is right now. Our YouTube comments are completely divided as well. Eduardo, Lula was the biggest thief in our country. Mo, Bolsonaro is a wannabe Trump. What do we get out of that situation if we've got one group saying your candidate is wrong, another group saying your candidate is wrong? Who suffers or who benefits? Adriana.
I think who suffers the most is democracy itself. Because, like I said, democracy is, to democracy to be strengthened, we need a scenario where people can dialogue, and that's what I'm not seeing happening. So this is my main concern about the elections. And as you can see, we are facing a very polarized scenario. So
yeah, it's just like a little microcosm of what is happening, I'm sure, in Brazil. I've got this really interesting comment here, Cecilia. I'd love you to unpack it and maybe add to it if you can. The Brazilian people want Bolsonaro, but the elites want Lula. That's one person's take. Can you unpack that?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so interesting that, and then if you ask, there will be someone else who would say the opposite, right?
Yeah,
the elites
exactly.
are supporting Bolsonaro and Lula is that. We got to the situation where it's not an election of which policy we want. It's an election of which method, which idol we have. So it's really right now we are having this dispute of my candidate is better than yours, and this is a good versus evil election, and not an election on issues and what Brazil needs coming forward. And I don't know how we get out of this, but this comment just paints. To me, it brings exactly this idea that some people will say what he said, right? The rich and the poor, and the other, some other commentary would just flip this on its head. But it's neither. You have supporters for both in both areas. You have, real elite supporting Bolsonaro, and you have real, and you have the poor supporting Lula as well. So that's definitely not the issue. But if you get a comment from one side or the other, that you're going to get this, this thing that is just like we are in a stalemate right now. We're not discussing issues. We're discussing who I like and who I don't.
Cecilia, that is such a good way to get into Pedro's question. We've only got a minute to answer it, but so do it very quickly if you can. Pedro wanted to know, what are the main points and plans of each government, a Lula government and a continued Bolsonaro government? Is it really clear to the voters that they've got different plans?
I think in the public debate, it's less clear. I think when you read the programs, you see that one candidate, Bolsonaro, is more of the same in terms of what he planned to do before, but he didn't deliver, anti-corruption. But there are many corruption scandals in his government. It's the most secretive government since dictatorship in Brazil. We don't know much. I think many things will come later. He also promotes the liberal economy, but didn't deliver the liberal economy that the liberals wanted either in Brazil. So Lula comes back with let's include people. Let's also put Amazon back, the Amazon forest back into the priorities of the country. Let's have education and health as a priority for all. So I think it's a more inclusive set of proposals. But I wanted to say what Cecilia mentioned. We don't have
Alona,
we're at
the very end of the show, so I'm glad that you were able to say that very briefly, and that I have time to say thank you, Alona, Adriana, Cecilia, and all of your excellent questions on YouTube. I feel I've got a little bit of the election buzz right here in the comment section. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.